We are in the final phase of the fourth turning, and the next 8 months will be more crucial to Bitcoin as you might expect. Today, I talk with George Bodine about the ongoing war and the implications on Bitcoin, about the absolute monster, which is strategy with stretch, and how you can prepare yourself for this final phase of the fourth turning. Enjoy. Hi, George. How are you doing? Everything fine in your end?
I'm doing great, partner. I'm definitely excited to talk today. I'm ready to set the dial to 11, cook some noodles, and have a come to Jesus moment. I mean, I'm pumped.
I love that. Yeah, it's crazy because we've talked about it before. On the one hand, the world is in chaos. We have this war things. We have all those things in Bitcoin, but also like with Iran and all the things that are going on. But on the other side, like everything is so bullish for Bitcoin. And you just said it right before we started recording. You have never been more bullish on Bitcoin than right now, and you're like really looking forward to the next 18 months. Maybe to get started, what are your kind of thoughts on how the world is currently looking and where we're headed right now?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's almost like a K-shaped world. There's a bifurcation that's difficult to reconcile. On the one hand, yes, we are in the middle of some incredible chaos. I'm a big fan of fourth turning theory, and I was just looking at Neil and Strauss and uh, looking at their concept of the fourth turning as far as an end game, like the last gasp of the crisis mode. And what's interesting is that, they were talking about the fourth turning in 97 when the book came out. And they also accurately predicted that the start of it would probably be in 8 to 10 years, which was the great financial crisis. And I would argue that really, for those people who think that was the crisis and the end game, that's grossly mistaken. Typically, in a seculum, 80 to 100 years, which is the period that they use in the theory, you're looking at probably the last 15 to 20 years, maybe 25 years, which would put us into around 2030 timeframe. And I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see this crisis come to a head. And remember that normally this is a total reset. It's a foundational change in the system. In the U.S., you can think of it, for us, it was the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Great Depression leading to World War II, and then we're in it now. And so, what that makes it very difficult to try to zoom out and stay focused on Bitcoin and your own monetary program, which you've got installed to protect you from this period. So, I mean, if you look on the outside world, yeah, it's incredibly chaotic. I'd have to say AI, this digital revolution that's taking place at the same time as the crisis mode is ending, is just it's more kindling really for the fire. But as far as Bitcoin, I'd have to say that everything that I follow, my thesis on Bitcoin has not changed. If I'm correct in that we're at the end game of a fourth turning, a crisis, the winter, if you will, if we're really here and this is what's going to play out in the next three, probably no more than 5 years, then you must have an understanding of how to protect yourself in that period. For me, it's Bitcoin, it's hard assets. I've even held some gold again, which is unusual for me. Uh, I, I I think that you must have things that the government cannot print right now.
Why did you go back to gold a little bit?
I ended up rotating out of strategy stock some time ago. And so I had excess cash, and the way things were going and the handwriting was on the wall for me anyway, I felt more comfortable holding a little bit of reserves in gold. Now, right now, it's going to sound like an idiot because I've rotated back into strategy. I mean, it got so cheap there that I couldn't help myself. And so I rotated money back into it. But, I took a good profit on my holdings. I was into strategy for years. And so, I mean, I have no complaints. I just think that right now it's very important for people to understand that you've got to protect yourself. I mean, no one is going to do this for you. If you look at what's going on right now, you're probably watching maybe the world's last armed conflict that is going to be truly using conventional weapons. Uh, I mentioned AI. AI is going to be, it's on the battlefield now with Maven through Palantir. They are basically using AI for targeting. And I think that they came up with like 5,000 targets on the first 1 to 2 days of strikes, based primarily on AI-driven battlefield assessment. And if you look at where AI is going as far as intelligent warfare, if you will, and the fact that we are now in a bottleneck at the Strait of Hormuz, if you just zoom out and think about where this is going in the future, we've always known, and the Strait of Hormuz has always been a bottleneck. I was there 50 fucking years ago in an F-18, and it was a bottleneck then, and it is one today. That's not going to change. The U.S., for some reason, did not anticipate how easy it was for Iran, which coastal waterway is along that strait, for them to actually create havoc inside that narrow, confined. Those ships, Robin, they've only got a 2 nautical mile entry and exit corridor that they use. You can't put in Navy ships. You can't put in a destroyer inside the strait and expect it to be able to protect itself. Naval warships need sea room to maneuver. And now with the idea of AIs and drones, and even AIs using autonomous weapon systems that are coming very soon, meaning submarines, even ski-doos of all things, it's going to be very difficult to keep choke points like that open.
What are the implications of this war of Iran?
Man, it's so far-reaching. It's difficult to. I think what you need to do is you just have to go back to first principles and understand what oil is. Oil is really like the lifeblood of the world right now. It's like blood, and it is the base layer to everything that's happening, not just physical products. You need oil to produce things. Oil, whether it's building tires, whether it's building paper, plastic products, it's a base layer. But on top of that, it funds things like fertilizer. Okay, just as an aside, I'll tell you where this is going. As this seeps out, as these cost increases that are coming are seeping out into the economy, we're going to feel the effects, consumers everywhere. Fertilizer, as I mentioned, urea, ammonia, both of them are throttled right now out of the strait. I think in the U.S., ammonia prices went up from the Middle East to like 92% right now. That's going to go into all the farmers. Diesel's approaching $5 a gallon, or will be soon, for farmers out there. And this is when they're going to be planting. All these things are going to have carryover effects. If they don't get this under control soon, and if oil continues above $100 a barrel Brent, we are going to see a major recession across the planet, and it's going to affect everything. And that's just one narrow confine that I'm discussing. I haven't even talked about LNG, the liquid natural gas, or the constraints to the Asian countries that are coming. This has far-reaching consequences. And again, it doesn't feel like the U.S. has thought of the second-order effects that are going to come out of this war. And I just go by what they told us 6 months ago. You remember, Iran's nuclear capability was destroyed. Trust me, anybody that tells you otherwise is lying. So I don't understand many of the strategic goals of this particular campaign. But I will tell you another thing. It's adding about $1 billion to our deficit every day. And the U.S. military must have that funded. This is not part of the defense authorization bill, which was up around $900 billion. And the Trump administration says they want to up it to $1.5 trillion fucking dollars or something. There are going to be some consequences to this. There already is. I'm sure you saw the print today on the PPI. I think it's an annualized 3.4% inflation rate. That is probably from these effects that we're seeing right now. If it continues another 30 days, I don't know where this is going to go.
And I think there's a good chance that it will reach another 30 days. I think we often I have a hard time believing that it's over like next week on Wednesday, something like that.
That's another thing, talking about second order effects and consequences. Again, it's, battlefield tactics evolve very quickly, especially in this digital age, especially with AI. But it is possible that the US military has not been able to adapt as quickly or to understand where this is going. I mentioned something as stupid as like a ski-doo. I don't know if you know what that is, but I mean, it's basically one person sits on top of a little motorized seagoing craft. And well, they've been weaponizing those. The US has got a program where they've been experimenting with them. One of them, one of these ski-doos or sea-doos or whatever you want to call them, washed ashore outside of Turkey in the Black Sea, still had explosives connected to it. You know how cheap that is to weaponize something like that and to put it into an autonomous weapon system where you release it and it's on its way? You know, just just look at some of the autonomous weapon system technology that's being pursued by Anduril, which is a company here in the U.S. Yeah, exactly. These are for snows, but they make them for uh, waterborne applications too. I just always called them a ski-doo from years ago. There you go. I don't know what they call them now. Sea-doo is one of them. Anyway, the bottom line is that these weapon platforms are extremely cheap. And how do you stop something like that? That coastal waterway along Iran's coast is very long, and you can put people over the top of that all you want. But even looking at the Shahed 131 and the 136 drone that Iran is using to great success, those things are cheap. I think the 131 is probably a $10,000 to $20,000 drone. Maybe the 136 is up to 50 grand. They actually can assemble them in modular components, and you can put them in the back of a small pickup truck and actually hidden, drive to a site, assemble them in about 3 hours, and then launch them. And what are we firing against them? When you look at the Patriot missile systems, you look at some of the cruise missiles that we're firing. Tomahawks, $4 million a piece here, depending upon their production run. And we're not making enough to replace them. I know they're telling us they are, but that's not true. They are not making enough weapons to replace these smart weapons. And then we haven't even talked about the war's effects on rare earth minerals. Everything that we want to replace, every single thing that you see being fired right now to be replaced requires rare earth minerals. And we don't fucking have them. China's got the largest reserves on planet Earth, 44 million tons of proven reserves. The next is Brazil at 22. I don't know what we've got, maybe like 2.5 million. That's it in the US. Greenland, by the way, that's got like 1.5, so it's not a lot. Venezuela has about the same, maybe a little bit more. But the problem is that we don't have the refining capability. China right now is producing 80 to 90% of all the refined rare earth minerals. And they just came out recently, just a few months ago, they said, hey, we're going to start putting export controls on those who are using these for offensive military capability. So what are we going to do here if this war continues? How do we get out of this? How do we call it success for this mission? We've already decapitated the leadership. I suppose we were already told once before that we had decapitated their ability to wage nuclear war. So what are we trying to do here? And what is it going to cost us going forward? I guess the good news is for me and for yourself, people like us that are trying to protect our families and our loved ones from this, we're involved and we are understanding that we need hard assets the government cannot print over the next 6 months. And that for me is primarily Bitcoin. That is going to be the winner in my mind from this.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, like, what is the implication for Bitcoin? Because I think a neutral global asset will always benefit from those things. Unfortunately, like I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, we don't want Bitcoin to be adopted because of war, but I think it's the reality of it.
You know, there was some groundbreaking stuff that just came out here that Iran is letting the passage of Chinese ships along their coastline and out of the strait. And what they are demanding is to be paid in yuan, the Chinese currency. So on the one hand, you look at the petrodollar system, which has been in place now since Bretton Woods, really, though, not in effect probably until the late 50s, fully in effect. And the petrodollar system itself, after Bretton Woods failed in the early 70s with 71 and the Nixon global decision to end gold repatriation, that set us up for a new system, the petrodollar system. But that system is in probably not peril, but it is definitely weakening in these, in these conditions. Look at what we did to relieve Russia from some sanctions so that we could get oil out to the rest of the world. This is not good for that petrodollar system, but at the same time, just look at what I said for a moment ago there. So Iran gets a bunch of bags of renminbi or yuan, big deal. If I gave you an opportunity to hold dollars or yuan, what would you probably pick?
Dollars.
Probably be dollars. If I gave you a chance to hold something for a long period of time as a store of value, and I gave you a choice between dollars and Bitcoin, I know what you would say. Let's just take that to the step further. These countries are beginning to realize, but they do not grasp yet. In Iran, their populace understood the importance of Bitcoin. I'm sure you saw the spikes in Bitcoin's price when the bombs started falling for Iranians. Bitcoin is durable, divisible, fungible, and its greatest property is that it has final settlement in digital at the speed of light and cannot be reversed. It is the ideal medium to conduct international settlement in times like these. These countries just don't either have the ability to store, mine, or understand the power of Bitcoin in this turmoil. But I believe someday that they will. And I think that perhaps based upon some of the things that have come out of Russia in the last 2 years, that they are definitely starting to understand it.
It's fascinating because I think Bitcoin is headed in a very volatile, but I think a very good period of time. I think it will be. I think in 5 years, if you look back, and probably even earlier than that, it will be so obvious that Bitcoin in 2026 was the best possible asset to buy. If you look at risk versus reward, look at volatility versus the reward you can possibly have, because there's almost no risk. I'm always hesitating and saying no risk. I don't see really risk, but I want to include the outer edge cases. And the reward is just like freaking amazing. Like this is an asset that could reach 200, 300, 400 trillion dollar market cap and take over the world. And this is just like such an outsized return bet you can take. It's just amazing that people don't see it in 2026.
Well, aren't you glad in a way, because that's our asymmetric, our leverage, our superpower, if you will. Because I agree with you. You say that it's a risk-off asset, and I agree 100%. But the rest of the world does not understand that. I mean, it's slowly happening. Bitcoin is becoming it's a virus to begin with, but it is becoming entrenched in the world's financial system. It's just an endless series of good, positive news for Bitcoin's adoption over the last 12 to 18 months. I think people are really shook up. Sentiment has been terrible on X and other platforms, and just in general, based upon the price action, I guess, over the last year, really a year. And for me, it doesn't affect me at all. My thesis is the same as it always has been for Bitcoin, and I intend to hold it for a long period of time. I don't want to do anything. I'm picturing a world coming in the future where I won't have to do jack shit with my Bitcoin except hold on to it. It'll be the buy, borrow, die strategy, and I do believe in that. So for me, my sentiment hasn't shifted. I will say that I'm absolutely surprised in this last cycle that the 100K price point was such a catalyst for older coins coming to life and being sold into the market. I did not anticipate that, I will say. And at the same time, I view it as a very positive uh, development. It's kind of what I would like to see. You know, Jordy Visser's discussion about the IPO moment for Bitcoin. I'm a big fan of Jordy. I think he's a very intelligent guy. I agree with most of what he's saying in that theory. Maybe push back on a little bit of it. For instance, this is nothing unique or new, this particular idea or period where long-term holders have sold into bull runs. They do that every time. I'd have to say where he really nails it is the idea of liquidity in the space, which is true, and and that the 100,000 point was a psychological barrier, I think, for many people to take profit. But imagine, you couldn't have done what we saw happen recently. You couldn't have put 80,000 coins into the market on a weekend and actually liquidated that without destroying the Bitcoin price. And it didn't. At that time when that happened, I think when Galaxy sold those coins, it only dropped about 4 or 5%, and then it recovered very quickly. But nonetheless, this is a very healthy thing. You want to see these coins change hands. You want that realized cap to do what it's doing now. You want to see new price points established, new people coming into the market at a higher level. We're going to have a lot of chop here. The 74K range is, I knew that that was going to be an initial rejection when we got up there. I don't know where it is today. And I expect that if it continues up somewhere around 78K, we're going to get another hard ceiling, if you will, that we've got to get through. And the biggest will probably be when we get back up to around 98K. So, but at the same time, I know that's going to happen. It's just a question of time.
The last time we talked, I think, was around Bitcoin Prague, and I think just a month later, Strategy came with something out on the market. I think it was July when they launched the Stretch Preferred. I'm not sure about 100% about the month. Please correct me, guys, if I'm wrong. But around that era, they launched Stretch, and I've seen you post about Stretch here and there a little bit. Now, to be totally fair, I've overlooked Strategy for most of my Bitcoin life. I completely missed that one. And I even had Seyr, the CEO himself, on my podcast. I was at his 100K party, and I just like missed that opportunity. In December, there was a guest on that told me about Strategy. I mean, there have been like 20 guests already on, but like with him, his story kind of resonated with me. And so I looked into it. And I'm now on my journey on diving really deep into Strategy and what the implications are, like what they're doing for Bitcoin and what the potential for the company is in the coming future, if they have a potential to be the number one, the number five, the number 10 company on planet Earth. So from that background, I'm just really curious because I've never talked about Strategy with you on any of our podcasts that we did before. How do you look at Strategy and their amazing product market fit they found now with Stretch and all the preferreds? How do you look at those?
Yeah, that's a great subject to talk about. I got involved with Strategy right after Michael Saylor initially talked about his accumulation program back in 2020. And at the time, I got into it, and the stock, the shares obviously went way up during that summer. And in the fall, I ended up selling it. I sold all of it. And I mean, today, if I'd ever kept that on there, I mean, we're talking multiple millions of profits that I ended up, leaving behind. And the reason was because I really couldn't understand what was driving Strategy's valuations. And that's a very difficult subject sometime. Many people pass up on Amazon and other of the companies like the Magnificent Seven because it's a very difficult process to put future earnings into some valuation model when you're looking at something that's either groundbreaking or requires on a network to function. So the good news is I kept following Strategy, and then a couple years later, after the last crash, the last cycle there, I just had a revelation. I could tell that Saylor and the company were not going to stop accumulating Bitcoin. It was very obvious to me. And I kept trying to understand where it was going. And I came up with the idea that it would become basically the world's first Bitcoin bank, or maybe bank's too limiting an idea, but the first financial institution. And and I came up with a sentence to describe that. And what it is I remember writing it down, that it is a global growth company that is utilizing its treasury operations through intelligent leverage to financialize Bitcoin. And I went back into it, and I ended up buying a lot of strategy stock, and I just held it. The reason I recently got out of it was because I just I felt like I wanted to have more exposure to Bitcoin itself. And it's obvious to me now that strategy is not going to stop. In fact, I'd have to say that they have demonstrated a groundbreaking series of products culminating in what you just said, Stretch, STRC. And so the price was very low again on it. And I thought, you know what? I still believe in what they're doing. I know where it's going. I don't necessarily like the fact that they are taking Bitcoin off the market forever. I mean, you realize that, right, Robin, that when they purchase Bitcoin, it's not coming back. And right now, I forecast, I mean, I believe they will get to 1 million coins. I didn't think that they could do that. And I think it's going to be very quick. I mean, if this continues, and you realize that they're doing this in a bear market, right? We are in a bear market. They just accumulated over 4,000, almost 5,000 coins in one day using that product and ATM issuance too, based upon the premium. So I'll take a pause for a minute, but yeah, I'll talk about Stretch too in a minute, because you're right. I mean, it's revolutionary product.
I mean, they are buying tens of thousands of Bitcoin every week in a bear market with a low MNAV with, I don't know, they have a 15% premium or something like that on their stock, on the NAV, something like that, maybe 20%. And the sentiment is super low. Like, no, like we are in a low sentiment area of Bitcoin. We can see it on like tens of thousands of different metrics that we could all look at. But I think most people would just agree with that. Another question for me is, they found clear product market fit with Stretch. The Sharpe ratio is already a 5. They have a volatility of 1% just after half a year or like 8 months or whatever the product is around. How many Bitcoin will they able to buy once we are in a full bull market, FOMO hits in, the ATM of strategies going wild because more people buy the common stock also, and people like I talked to at least 5 different people already on Stretch outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem that were skeptical about Bitcoin, and I told them about Stretch. They all love that. The only question is like, can I trust it? But like, yeah, you can. It's like an easy thing to say, but like they all love the idea, and so it's kind of, I don't know. They found a money glitch, I feel like.
Yeah, you really need to think about how this product came about. It is a perpetual preferred, but you could almost call it similar to a money market fund, a bond. There are so many things that it's similar to. It was developed, it's probably the first financial instrument in markets ever developed by AI. And it is revolutionary. You have to realize that all these other different products that they started with were building to trying to find the sweet spot of what they wanted to do. What's unique about Stretch is, let's just say that you call it a pseudo bond like device, right? What's so incredible is that they flipped the idea of what that is. So what I mean by that is, instead of the price fluctuating, they've made it a fixed price. And what they're doing is manipulating the interest or issuance to maintain that price. That's revolutionary, and it's working. And here's the other thing too is, yeah, when it first started out, it was a little volatile because they're trying to find the sweet spot in both the interest rate and in the issuance to maintain it inside that $99 to $101 framework. But they've done it. I mean, if you're watching there, even when we had that massive dump, and that's another thing, when we had the breakdown in Bitcoin's price where it wicked down to 59K and strategy went down to like $107 a share, I think. And I missed that one. I got in a little bit late after that. But nonetheless, if you were watching, you saw that the par values dropped like a rock there. And what happened? You know what? If you were smart like me, you went in there and you bought it because you believed that they would be able to recover and bring it back into the par value. So not only are you returning, I've been returning 12% on my investment, but on top of that, I'm getting a premium on the par. Now, I don't think that's going to happen all the time in the future, but it's just something to watch for. So what is going to stop Stretch from achieving this, pendulum, this flywheel, this rocket launch? I don't know. I mean, I've tried to game it out. If you look, one of the smartest fucking thing these guys did was they ended up putting in over $2 billion as a reserve. That was brilliant. They can sit there and pay that dividend out for years. And here's another thing too. On this last earnings call, which was really a smart move, somebody, I don't know if it was Larry Lepard, but somebody asked them a question regarding Bitcoin's price and what it could fall to in order to put them in some part where they had to issue new credit or new debt in order to survive, basically, almost as if you were threatened by some, I don't know, maybe not bankruptcy is too hard a word for it, but threatened with liquidity or confidence in the market. You know what they said? Have to drop to $8,000 Bitcoin, and it would have to stay there, not just drop there, stay there. So if Bitcoin went down to $8,000, first off, I'd buy as much as I could, and if strategy was in difficulty there, I would probably buy as much of their stock as I could too. I just don't see how this. I'm not sure how this is going to fail. It just seems like it's a successful launch that's going to continue to build on itself.
Yeah, and I think something interesting also to note here is it's not debt, so they don't owe anything to anyone. I mean, they still have a little bit of debt of I think some convertibles, but it's like very little to what they have, and they have to plan to like dial it down. I think it's a very important thing that people don't understand. They think there's a margin call risk with strategy. If like Bitcoin goes down, they're liquidated.
That's a good point. In fact, that's exactly what I was trying to say, but you put it much more succinctly. And it is that idea of margin call or the idea that they're over leveraged. And that is not the case. Just get into the numbers, do your research, and you'll see clearly that they are not. So, I guess I said that's all the good news, and that's great. But nonetheless, just be aware of the fact that strategy is taking Bitcoin off the market, and it's probably not coming back. And for everybody out there that's hodling, you will be rewarded for your patience. For those people that are over leveraged or trading or fucking around with Bitcoin, you are taking a real risk here, because at some point you do not know when Bitcoin is going to rip. Nobody does. I talk about these different ceilings based upon past price performance or based upon different options, futures, trading, different heat maps. But nonetheless, I don't have any clue when Bitcoin is going to rip. Bitcoin has a very narrow period of time in which it does rip. It's like 10 to 20 days max, maybe within a year. And if you miss those days, you miss them. So this is not a time to be trying to be smart with Bitcoin. This is a time for you to accumulate, stack like a smart psychopath, and then hodl. Hold on to that Bitcoin. Do not lose it.
I think they did some study with the S&P 500, and with Bitcoin, it's even more extreme, where if you've missed the 10 biggest days in the S&P 500 over the last 30 years, you've missed on like 50% of the returns. So it's like just 10 days and like 30 years make like 50% of all the profits and gains in in that period. And with Bitcoin, I imagine, I haven't seen anything, it's probably even more extreme, where there's like a couple of days per year where you make most of the gains, and like no matter who's selling your course, nobody knows what those days are.
Nobody knows. That's right, Robin. And, it's very important, especially, getting back to how we started out this conversation, with Strauss and Howe and their discussion around what's called the fourth turning. These are chaotic times that are going to cause tremendous volatility in markets. I don't think we've seen anything yet, uh, whether it's Bitcoin, gold, oil. You know, one of the things that's really interesting about AI that we haven't discussed, and I don't know if I've even discussed this on the air with anyone before, is that if you understand AI, and if you're a fan of Jeff Booth's book, and have followed him for some time, he is correct. I mean, technology is deflationary. The reason we haven't benefited from the deflationary print of technology is because governments and fiat currencies are printing to capture that and more. So, what is going to happen in an AI world where we see the ultimate deflationary impulses going forward? If you want to talk about some interesting theory and things to think about, that's an interesting one. I personally have looked at the technology. I believe it's real in the sense that, yes, there are AI bubbles. Yes, there are interconnected debt instruments between these different organizations, the frontier models, the hyperscalers, that should give you pause. But AI itself is not going away. It is going to continue to build. It is a technology that is a must-have. And it's also part of why we are engaged in a superpower arms race right now between the US, China, is because of that AI potential for both battlefield tactics, weaponry, and decision-making, including these autonomous weapon systems that are coming. So, getting back to what I was saying, past this chaotic period and if deflationary impulses come, you have to realize that what is AI actually replacing? And that's another thing that people don't discuss very often, because we talk about jobs that are being taken. But you have to realize that everything that's going on between your ears right now, look at me and look between my headset. Everything that's going on between my ears right now that's the threat vector. That is what AI is coming for. When the diesel tractor and the gasoline tractor were developed and they were deployed in the late 1800s, you replaced about 150 to 200 workers in a field. Those workers, though, then began to congregate into larger and larger regional areas and then cities. And in fact, the Industrial Revolution was born in this period. Tremendous productivity for these workers. When you replace thought, when you replace a brain, where does that worker go? Where does the thought go to? What is the fallback job for that? And that's not being addressed. We can look at the numbers that are coming out right now, and they're astounding. I'd have to say the biggest one that really rocked me on my heels was when the leaked memo from Amazon came out about 5-6 months ago, saying we're not going to hire 600,000 people over the next 8 years because of AI, and also because of their robotics that they're incorporating. So when I say that this is very bullish for Bitcoin in this deflationary world, it's because the thing that AI is not going to do is they are not going to be printing. They're not going to deleverage hard assets, whether it's copper, whether it's oil, whether it's Bitcoin. In fact, in that world, and in the AI agentic world, where we have 1 million agents being born every day in the US that are going to require digital wallets and want digital money and use Bitcoin as a base layer. That Bitcoin Policy Institute just released that study. I'll bet you saw it several days ago. And it said overwhelmingly, that was the words they used, overwhelmingly, AI agents and AI itself prefers Bitcoin as a store of value, over 80%. So although there may be stable coins, there may be Lightning, which is going to open up at the end of March with Strike. They're going to have Lightning payments going live. I think it was Strike. But with all of the AI on top of these digital assets, the base layer is going to be Bitcoin. You can almost think of it as US treasuries, if you will, to a digital world. And I think the demand for Bitcoin is going to just accelerate like a rocket.
That's crazy to think about because what is the value of something that is truly scarce and cannot be manipulated in a world where everything can be manipulated? If you think about us, this interview could be done by AI. I think if you would have done it with AI, it probably people will still spot it, but I don't think they will spot it in 5 years. I don't think they know, is that the real George or is that the like a clone George and he's just like painting pictures in the background. And even robotics, I think we will live in this world where there's a robot coming near you, and without stabbing a knife in his belly, you would not know if it's a real human being or if it's a robot, because they just like get so good at like talking and speaking and moving like human being. I don't know how long this all takes. I just know like it will come reality at some point. And then Bitcoin is the only thing left that you can actually verify and has as like some true scarcity to it.
That's an interesting point that you bring up. That is interesting because I actually think that you're right about that. That is in 3 to 5 years, I think you could probably have a virtual clone doing an interview like this that could probably fool most people. So if that is the case, it's almost like what I was discussing earlier regarding AI. If that is the case, then what has some of the most important value to human beings as a species? I believe that it would be to verify that you and I are actually real and that we're here having a real conversation, and that, all of our fallacies, all of our hesitations, all of our human inputs will become even more important because people will want that human connection. One of the most important things you may have in the future world as deflation takes effect and you have more and more wealth, so to speak, purchasing power, is the ability to just have experiences with other human beings, whether it's a dinner, whether it's friends, family. And I say today, I use AI constantly. I'm just constantly involved using it. But I'm also trying to cultivate at the time real experiences with people and doing real things. I just got back from the Caribbean and a deep dive trip, swimming with and just having a blast down there. Friends out doing things, in the evening on the islands, down with sharks, swimming and stuff. I mean, I just had a great time, and it was really special and important because it was an experience with other people. And I don't know the future. I have no idea where this is going. I do know it's going to be incredibly disruptive. And again, it's coming on the heels of what I think is the end of the fourth turning, the winter. And so we've got to get through this, all of us. And, this is a great time to be there for people that you love and that you want to be around.
And I think this leads us also to an interesting one that I'm curious how you think about, because I think the most valuable thing that we have is not Bitcoin, but the time that we have. And so, so the time spent with our loved ones, the time spent with ourselves, the time spent thinking, that just the time that you have on this planet Earth. I mean, yes, there are movements and there might just be escape velocity with health where we just like get older and older and we can replace things with robotic things, and like I don't know, like we get a artificial heart. I'm not an expert in all of those, so I leave it open as it might happen, it might not happen. But as it stands right now, time is the most valuable thing that we have, and I'm willing to trade some Bitcoin for it.
Well said, Robin. That's really well said. Obviously for somebody as old as myself, in the fourth turning, I think the end of the last fourth turning was probably around 55 or so, as far as 1955. So I came, actually, it'd probably be the end of World War II. So by 1955, that would put me in the architect of Nomad, I believe. And, it's funny because what that means is that I'm nearing the end of my life, the end of the saculum, the 80 to 100-year-old life, as this fourth turning comes to a close. And I absolutely understand and both see what you're discussing, which is that of all my assets, of all the precious things to me, time is the most. And I try not to waste it anymore. You know, when you start talking about time, then you have to acknowledge to yourself, what is wealth? And, wealth is not money. Wealth is not riches. Wealth is not things. All things that you own also own a portion of you. If you buy an expensive biplane that you want to take care of, guess what? It takes a part of you, your commitment, your time, your energy. A house is the same thing. A car. You need to somehow, as a human being, find that balance that allows you to enjoy your life and to be purposeful, including those others that are around you, to be with them. And at the end of your life, when you take that final breath, all those things that you collected, all those trinkets in life, all the things that you might have liked, maybe a beer mug collection or something in the back of the studio, they're not going to mean jack shit. You go out of here with nothing. You're bare naked. You might have a toe tag on if you're unfortunate, but that's about it. What you leave behind are all the memories, all the things that people have of you, the changes that you made in other people's lives. Maybe sometimes it's just a word you said or a sentence. Often it's what you didn't say to somebody that's really important. So yes, time. Time is very precious, my friend. And I don't know how much time we've got left.
What is a toe tag?
Well, when I was a cop, you know, uh, and you went into the morgue, a couple times I went into the morgue and, they wheel a body out and there's nothing there. I mean, the body's naked, it's a morgue, except there's a toe tag on the end of the toe. And it's a tag that has the person's name on there and it identifies them. And I assume they still do the same thing today. Maybe not, but doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is when they wheel you out of there, when you're gone, you're not taking anything with you, Robin.
Yeah, I want to bring this one up because I found it
Oh yeah.
such an amazing tweet of yours. I think it's already a couple of, yeah, it's like 1.5 years ago already that you posted that, or like more than that. And it's pinned to your profile, and I just wanted to read it because I think it fits so nicely in what we just discussed. You said Bitcoin, life is good as you let it be. Stop arguing on X. Don't buy into the right versus left warfare rhetoric. You are Bitcoiner. You have won the war. Be a magnanimous, like my English is not good enough for that word. Victor, George, the artist seen with full Bitcoin bags, bourbon, and ice cream. That's an amazing image. And then that teddy bear is huge. It's bigger than yourself.
He's my buddy. So, the thing is that I really believe what I said when I say that if you hold Bitcoin, if you understand Bitcoin, if you're convicted and you know what you hold, then you have won this war. This is a very simple process. I have never seen more asymmetric advantage in holding an asset in my life. There is nothing. One thing I did not touch on when we were discussing strategy and why STRC works is because it would not work on any other asset. No underlying asset, no AUM. There is nothing that strategy could stick up its butt that would make it work except Bitcoin. So if you understand that, if you realize, and that's part of why I said at the beginning, a global growth company utilizing their treasury operations through intelligent leverage to securitize or financialize Bitcoin. That's it. Without Bitcoin, this does not work. And if you understand that, if you look at the CAGR and the returns of Bitcoin and you look at the hardness of it, gold, I mean, obviously everybody's really enamored with gold. I just bought some gold as a defensive measure. And besides, gold is fairly stable. It has been in the past compared to Bitcoin. So if, the shit hits the fan and I need some cash or something, I can always sell my gold. I'm not going to take much of a loss. Or more importantly, I'm not going to lose the opportunity cost if I had to sell some Bitcoin, which I do not want to do. So this only works on Bitcoin, this whole philosophy. And if you look at gold, right now there's probably about 210,000 tons of gold above ground. They're mining about somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 a year out of the ground, just depending upon the price and different fines, etc. So, it's got an inflation rate between 1.5 to 2%. This guy had that for millennia now. And that means that every 36 years, you're going to lose, half of your purchasing power or thereabouts. Bitcoin doesn't have that. It's unique. Its stock to flow ratio is about 115 right now. I think gold's is like 65, 66, somewhere in there. There's no comparison. So if you understand that, then just like that picture you brought up a minute ago, you've already won. Don't overthink this. It's just, fifth grade math, as my friend used to say, Greg. It's easy. And once you get it, once you understand it, you're at peace. I mean, look at me. I'm having the greatest time of my life. Bitcoin sank down like a rock. I didn't give a shit. I don't care. And as the years, the mismatch is duration. It's the duration risk. Most assets, as duration goes out farther and farther on the curve, you get more and more exposed. You're more and more nervous about lending money, whatever. Look at the treasuries. Look at what's happening right now in the bond market. People are getting nervous, and they're not flooding to treasuries. They're starting to wonder how much they're going to have to get for that treasury in order to be rewarded. It's a duration risk and a mismatch. Bitcoin doesn't have that. The only risk that you can associate with Bitcoin is the nascent asset part of it. You can say, oh, Bitcoin's only been around 16, 17 years. It's risky. Okay, I agree. You're absolutely right. But what I do know is from studying that it's every 10 minutes, tick tock, next block. And I have no concerns or worries about Bitcoin. Even the current controversy that's going on, whether it's knots versus core, BIP 110, none of that worries me. I think it's part of Bitcoin's process, and I'm convicted. And if you are, then again, you've already won. Be magnanimous, which means, a gracious victor.
There are English words that I've never heard before. May I will first want to get to personal finance and then maybe just briefly to the BIP 110 issue, because I've come to realize now that I'm 27 years old and I'm getting more wise in my young years, that a cash reserve sometimes is not a bad idea to have something else outside of Bitcoin and self-custody. I've realized that in the last like 6 months, and now I'm slowly building up other cash reserves, building up something else outside of Bitcoin, because up until I think November, I was like just 100% Bitcoin and self-custody. Now people ask more questions because now we have Bitcoin, we have cold hard cash that you can build up as a reserve, like being USD on your account or euro or whatever, or even gold. Then you can buy now MSTR for amplification. You can buy STRC for cash flow. There's so many options now as a Bitcoiner that you can do with your personal finance and like how you allocate your money and all of those things. Do you have any, not guidelines, but like any way or framework to think about all the different options you have as a Bitcoiner when you are aware of what Bitcoin is and how you best position yourself?
Well, let's get back to some basics though when we have that discussion. And I'll start it out with one thing. I'll fall back to one of my first comments here at the start of this, which is that you must have things that governments cannot print. That is the key to your going forward. And the second thing is there is nothing that compares to Bitcoin in cold storage where you hold the keys. That is Bitcoin. All these derivatives that are being built on Bitcoin, all of these options tradings on IBIT, what are they trying to do? They're trying to capture demand without spot. And that market is still small. It's nascent. It probably will never replace or able to hold down Bitcoin's price for long. But nonetheless, what you want is you must have Bitcoin in cold storage. I talk about strategy, but that's just paper shit. It's nothing. That could be gone tomorrow. And unfortunately, I'm exposed to it and Stretch through a product that could be seized by the government. It could be frozen. If the government gets a wild hair up their ass and they don't like Jethro anymore, they can freeze everything I own. You know what they can't freeze? The cold storage Bitcoin that I hold. Now, I will say there are risks to that. I just recently had to disperse. I had to like geo disperse my Bitcoin. I don't want to get too much into the security part of it, but I couldn't hold it at home anymore in any way, shape, or form. Things are changing. I mean, it's getting much more dangerous out there. But nonetheless, again, it's Bitcoin and cold storage. That is the key here. You need to get your stuff off exchanges. Every one of those exchanges is a risk, whether it's Coinbase or any other exchange. Binance, they're all a risk. All these ETF products, they have risk associated with it. If you're under some jurisdiction of a different government than what I'm under, you're under risk too. There's all counterparty risks to these assets. Now, you talked about gold, but my parents back in the 70s, after Nixon went off the gold standard and the petrodollar was established by like 1975, I think it was pretty much in place. Well, in 76, I think it was, is when they actually allowed U.S. citizens to start buying gold again. My parents came home with gold, gold coins, gold bars. We were putting them all over the damn place. Well, now you got to worry about losing them. For instance, did I bury it under that part of the tree or is it in this part of the yard? You had to worry too about the melt premium. Fraud. I mean, do you realize how easy it is to fraudulently pass a bar as gold? It's very easy. Unless you melt the damn bar down, you'll never know. The Australian Mint was caught trying to slightly, I won't say dilute, but maybe, probably dilute is probably the word, bars that gold that they were sending to China. So, there's just so much risk involved in it. And when you try to get into the market, you'll see that liquidity doesn't always exist for these products. I don't know how to beat hard assets that cannot be printed. And of all of them, Bitcoin and cold storage is the hardest. And I understand what you said. I've done the same thing. I've minimized some of my Bitcoin exposure lately. That's because, I mean, look at me. I'm getting old. I'm as old as dirt here. And you know what? I have to acknowledge that, and I have to be aware of it. I have to think about that risk.
You're very young in your mind. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Like
I'll tell you, I can still kick some major ass too, buddy, if I need to.
yeah, and you are a lot of fun to be around, as I learned in Prague. So that's really cool. I want to talk about PIP 110. I think we in Prague. I think we covered the core versus knots topic a little bit, and it has developed quite some time since then. I came to the conclusion for myself just that, as you said before, that Bitcoin will be fine. I think we've seen an immense immune system reaction to what Core did, and I think it was very healthy. I liked how Bitcoin community reacted. But what's the current status? How you look at the BIP 110 and the Core versus Knots kind of debate that is going on?
Well, yeah, I remember back in Prague, I think I was one of the first people that started bringing this out because I could see where this was going. And, it was me that asked Seyr in Prague last year just to opine, I think was the word I used, on the Bitcoin protocol, knots, and core, and his thoughts on that. And since then, I mean, I've taken a lot of flack over the last year over this. I've been called stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't write code. I'm a boomer. I mean, I've been called every damn thing you can imagine. You know, I don't give a shit. I mean, I don't need clicks, likes, followers. I don't need anything from anybody. I mean, I'm basically independent in life and I can do whatever I want. So I don't care. Say what you want. But the bottom line is, guess what? After about a year, I believe I was proven right. You know, I said you cannot trust Core. They're incompetent. They're corrupt. They're corrupt inside their organization, a walled garden that doesn't understand how to communicate. And secondly, I believe they're corrupted from the outside. So what happened? They released a poorly executed Core V30. And remember, we had influencers out there talking about how you couldn't trust Luke. You could trust Core, though. They've got 200 of the best developers out there. You can trust them. Well, what did they do? They released a version, a protocol implementation that was fucked up, had a bug in it, a bug that cost people their Bitcoin and legacy wallets. What did you hear from those influencers after those jackasses were out there promoting something? Did you hear any apologies? Did you hear any of them come out and say, hey, you know what? We messed up. You know, Core does have a problem. Core does need to change. No. What do you hear from them? Crickets. So that's where I stand on Core right now. I don't trust them. I hope they're torn down brick by brick. I run knots on my node. If you're a Bitcoiner out there and you've got any kind of financial reward from Bitcoin, you have a responsibility. You have it as a Bitcoiner to man up and run a node. You decide whether you're going to run Core or knots, whatever. I run knots, the latest version. And as far as BIP 110, BIP 110 is a soft fork. It's not a hard fork. It's a soft fork. We've had soft forks before. And I believe this soft fork will be successful. You know, it's unusual in the sense it's a temporary source soft fork. It's probably going to activate in August, I believe, of next year, the way things are going. It depends a little bit upon the mining the blocks because it's a block height that it activates at. And it'll be good for a year, which is great. It'll allow us to see how that works out, see if there are any things that we need to either keep or not keep. You know, I believe it'll be a miner activated soft fork. I believe that once you get to about 10% of the hash rate signaling or flagging for BIP 110, it's a done deal. I mean, it will happen. You know, most people don't realize it, but SegWit was activated in the same way. It was very few nodes that actually ran. I think it was like 600 nodes that were running SegWit signaling for it, and it passed. Why? It's an intolerant minority. You know, in this discussion, rather than get into the weeds, let me just say this, okay? And I'll say the same thing I said in Prague last year. You know, Bitcoin is money, first and foremost. It is peer-to-peer electronic cash. It's the most important mission that it has. It is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind, and we can't let it fail. Bitcoin is money. It's not arbitrary data. It's not your JPEGs of pixelated dicks or your fucking frogs. It's money. And people such as myself, hardcore Bitcoin maxis who see it that way and don't want arbitrary data on the network, we are going to fight for that. We're fighting for it now with knots, and we're going to fight for it with BIP 110. So that is the basic premise. That is why I sit here where I sit today. And I think that we'll win on this. I think that I do believe it will be activated. And I think it'll be close. It'll be right to the end when it will suddenly capitulate. You know, miners can't take a chance. You know, here's another thing. Miners don't determine the network. They're not in charge. It's not exchanges. It's not big miners. You know who's in charge? It's node runners. It's people like you and me. We're in charge. We were before and we are now. So again, if you're listening out there, get off your ass, get a node, run something on it, and think for yourself about what you're going to do in the future.
And I think no matter where you stand in this whole thing, I think the most important thing is to run a node and actually think for yourself what implementation you want to support. Because I don't know who said it, but someone said it, and I think we don't need more nodes. We need more nodes that think for themselves and are actually used. So we need actual nodes that think when there are updates coming out, they are active in the network and they actually know what is going on, not just like, oh, this influencer told me I should run this. Oh, I guess I run this. Like that's not a node. Like no, like this is not the like, then we can also just like have 5 guys deciding it if we have that system. We need a network, a distributed network of as many people as possible that understand what they're doing and are active participants in the network.
I love that, Robin. That's really well said, buddy. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. But it's really, I think it's really, people don't do it. I also for a long time didn't do it, and it's because it's at first glance not necessary. Like the same as the self custody is at first glance not necessary, and so people hesitate to like, why should I spend maybe $100 or $200 on like a setup, or maybe 800, 900, depending on what Kasana setup you're buying, and let it run and like go through the hustle of setting it up. It's not an immediate financial reward that you get, but I think it's very important to fight for that.
Yeah, Bitcoiners are kind of a hardcore lot to begin with, and we're always questioning things, and we should. We should question constantly. Don't trust, verify. And I'm a big fan of that. And again, I think that people are misunderstanding the commitment to people like myself who are just hardcore maxis. I mean, we're tough sons of bitches. Well, I mean, we've been drugged through the mud. It's the picture of the honey badger with the quills stuck out of him walking down the road because he really doesn't give a shit. And I think that this messaging is very, very important. The idea that we are going to fight this. It's the reason that Ethereum exists on a separate blockchain or a separate chain now, proof of stake. Vitalik Buterin had an opportunity he wanted to develop on Bitcoin. And he actually posted, he said one of the reasons he left Bitcoin was because of the hostility that in those days, the core developers and maintainers had about putting arbitrary data on Bitcoin. So, if you want to do that kind of stuff, go find Ethereum to do it on. Go find another blockchain. Go do something. But you know what? We need to get back to the basics of what we were doing back in 2014 when we had hardcore dispersed globally Bitcoin core maintainers and Bitcoin developers. And I want to see us get back to that world.
What a beautiful message to before our end routine on the podcast to end it with. Thank you so much already for that, George. We have an end routine, as you might know from the previous episodes, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest, and this one is a really fun one. I'm almost afraid to ask you that, but it doesn't come from me. It comes from the previous guest, and you can answer to that as you want. The question is, would you kiss Peter Schiff for 1 Bitcoin?
Oh, yes, I would. Yes, I would. And I'd probably make sure that I had a big can of sardines before I did it, and I'd tongue him too. And when I was done, I'd say, "Give me my Bitcoin, you dipshit." Do you know how much money Peter Schiff has cost people? Do you have any idea how much harm he has done in this system? And I have reputable people that have talked to me that have met him in person, and he really actually does believe some of the stupid stuff he says. I'm so tired of people giving him airtime. People should just basically say, go sit in a corner. You're an idiot. You had a chance to buy Bitcoin at $1. You fucked that up. Then you screwed it up for everybody else. You've made endless posts about how Bitcoin was not going to succeed, how it was going to fail. Every time that it's died, has come back, and you look stupider and stupider every year of your life. So yeah, come over here. I'm going to tongue you. And when I'm done, you give me my Bitcoin, you jackass. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
I love that. An amazing answer to a very nice question. Thank you so much, George, for being on the podcast and for being such a gracious guest on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Just type my name into Google or something, and I'm the first thing that comes up. My, art and website and some of the stuff I do. And then on X, you can always find me on there. It's Jethro, JETHROE 111. And anybody else that doesn't have a blue check mark, that name on there, you know that they're a scam and they're just trying to rip you off. I'll never DM anybody. I never reach out to anybody. Again, I don't need anything from anybody. And yeah. Well, I'm really glad we had a chance to talk here. Remember, kids, you got to toughen up right now. You got to be hard. It's going to be a really rough 3 to 5 years. You're seeing some of it right now in the controversy, the war, everything else out there. And I know it's depressing sometimes, very anxiety inducing, but you know what? You just got to toughen up, get through this. You got to hodl. You got to know what's important in life. And on the other side, you're going to look great. We're all going to have a beer together in Prague sometime soon. Have a good time.
100%. Come to BTC Prague. It's the only conference in the year which is 100% certain I will be there. I'll go to a lot of other conferences as well, but Prague is the only one that I can guarantee you I have to be very sick to not show up there.
Same. Same, and I'll see you there this year. We'll have a great time together, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, George, for being on the podcast. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back.
I love it. I love it.
If you live in Europe like I do and want to buy Bitcoin the right way, check out Relai. Relai is a Bitcoin only platform with no distractions, no shitcoins, just a BTC. It's also the easiest way I've found to do what actually works, buying Bitcoin on a consistent basis. Relai is also self-custodial. They never have the keys to your Bitcoin. No freezing of your assets, no counterparty risk, no rug pulling whatsoever. I have been a long-term fan of Relai, not only because it's incredible, easy to use and very beginner friendly, but also because it just works. If you want to get started with Relai today, click the link down in the pinned comment or in the description. And once you have downloaded the app, type in Robin in the referral code section of the app to save 10% on fees. So set up your DCA Bitcoin plan today with the Relai app and get cheaper Bitcoin if you use code Robin. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. You get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Finally, we have BTC Prague back in 2026. And this year, I'm not only speaking on a panel, but I'm actually going to present an interesting new angle, a perspective, a Bitcoin thesis at BTC Prague this year for the first time ever. I've never done that on any other conference, so this will be a fun one. If you listen to this show on a regular basis, I would love to meet you in Prague this year. It's very high signal, no noise, and Prague is just a freaking amazing city with awesome drinks and a lot of good food. Use code Robin to get 10% off, and if you buy with Bitcoin, Bitcoin, you get an additional 5% off your ticket price. I'll see you there in Prague. Make sure to come say hi. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.